The first panel will deal with the Americans, or primarily at least, with that particular aspect of the support that has been coming from the United States. In overall figures, of course, the European support is substantially bigger than the American support, but in the military domain, the American support has been important. US is facing an election, we understand, later this year, and there are significant uncertainties on the American political scene. So let's discuss what that might mean and the implications it has for the European countries and the implications it has for Ukraine. And we got this stellar panel that is here. We start with Jim Costa, who is House of Representatives, which is, I understand, the place of the major turmoil in the United States at the moment. And I said to him, you will have to answer for your entire country in this particular panel. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister, and it's good to be back with my third participation in the Yalta Economic Security Council. And today, obviously, we reflect upon 2 years of Russia's invasion, unprovoked, of Ukraine. And I just want to, in answering your question, put this in perspective, because we all agreed 2 years ago that this was, in terms of a seminal moment in world history for Ukraine, for Europe, for the United States, a seminal moment and a test of our time. And I think we all agreed that it was about good and evil. Today, I think we witness once again what has happened. Russia is a syndicate masquerading as a country with a mob boss, Putin, a war criminal for all that he's done over the last 2 years. And if we want to be reminded of that fact, we know what mob bosses do with their opposition. Last week, the murder of his opposition, Oleksiy Danilov. And of course, every day the people of Ukraine feel the war crimes of Putin and this syndicate that is attempting to change history, not only for Ukraine, but for Europe and for the rest of the free world. Europe, 2 weeks ago, provided an additional 52 billion euro. The United States has joined, and I think President Biden over the last 2 years, in bringing together US resources for military assistance, for economic assistance, for humanitarian assistance. But over the last 4 months, we have been trying to put together an additional supplemental package that would provide over $61 billion, a total of $95 billion. The number has changed, but the Senate, and I want to, as challenging as you noted about what's going on in the House, the Senate, and Chuck Schumer was here yesterday, voted by 70 to 29 for a $95 billion package that would provide assistance to Ukraine, to Israel, to humanitarian assistance, to Taiwan, and to also begin replenishing Americans' own military needs. You can hardly get a motherhood resolution out of the United States Senate at 70 to 29. So it was significant. And with some of the preconditions that Speaker Johnson required 4 months ago about a border security portion of the legislation, and then rejected it, a very serious measure. So right now we have a measure that I am co-sponsoring with my colleague, Don Davis. Fitzpatrick was here earlier, that would provide additional assistance for Ukraine, for Israel, for Taiwan, It needs to provide humanitarian assistance as well. And we are looking at multiple options to pass this in the next several weeks. We are supposed to go back on Wednesday to pass a budget because we will have a government shutdown if we do not deal with this matter on March 1st and March 7th. So obviously we have to avoid a government shutdown. That will be our first order of business. But we've had multiple House delegations here in the last month, and you have spoken to them. They have done press availabilities with the European press and Ukraine. They have all said what I will tell you today. We must get this supplemental package done, period. And there are multiple ways we can do that through our own parliamentary procedures in the House. Some of you are now becoming familiar with the House of Representatives parliamentary procedures. Victor and I were talking about that. What you probably have heard is a concurrent, a motion to discharge. And if we have 218 members sign that, and I will sign that, and I know Don will sign that, we're going to need a handful of Republicans, but I believe those votes are there. It's whether or not they have the profiles and courage to do what's right for America, what's right for Ukraine, and what's right for the Western Alliance. And that we will be tested. If we are not able to bring the bill to the floor, because I believe just as the Senate passed it on a bipartisan fashion, there are the votes to pass it in the House on a bipartisan fashion. But we have to get it to the floor. There are several other strategies that we are considering if in fact we're not able to get the 218 votes to discharge the bill to the House floor. I believe we must, and therefore because we must, we will pass a supplemental package that will provide assistance to Ukraine. It won't be pretty, and it will not be easy. But I believe in the next several weeks, hopefully before the end of March, that the United States will respond as a beacon of light and as a protector of our common security for democratic values, for the democracies that we share in common, both in Europe and throughout the world.
Thank you. And let's hope that you will be successful in these efforts. For any outside observer of the US political scene at the moment, it looks pretty confusing, but I guess it looks even more confusing if you are on the inside.
Well, the challenge is that the bipartisan votes are there. It may be as much as 300 votes. We need 218. But this has gotten caught up into the partisan politics within the Republican conference. And that's the challenge we have to overcome.
And that I also see when I look at the opinion polls, although there's a partisan divide in the support, but overall support in the US is holding up very well for Ukraine. So that is not the number one problem. But thanks for your remarks. I intend now to bring in first two prominent Ukrainian voices and then two prominent European voices on the same issue. Start with Alexandra Ustinova here, ladies first, who is a member of the Rada.
Thank you so much. And I would like to thank our American colleagues who it takes 2 days to get to Ukraine, to spend a few hours here and just to show your support. And we understand, we want you to thank you for that because this is very meaningful for us. I cannot say more than Jim did because there has always been bipartisan support and we had been very grateful for having that support. Unfortunately, every time I come to Democrats, they're telling me to go talk to Republicans. When you go to Republicans, they're telling you to go talk to the Democrats. And this is like a ping pong game that has been always there. it is always easier when I'm like, can we just have a meeting together? So there is like Democrats and Republicans sitting, so we can just negotiate it much faster. But unfortunately, for the last, and it's been already 5 months since September 30th when the bill needed to be passed to support Ukraine. And we are grateful for our European partners who stepped in and actually did support it, especially with the humanitarian support. But there is one clear thing: we cannot make it without the United States weapons. And unfortunately, with the supplemental stuck right now in Congress, the production lines are not ramped up. And so it means that the deliveries of not only artillery shells, but the air defense, which is critical and needed, will be delayed. What needs to be done on our side, I think we did more than we could have. We've sent tons of delegations. We sent the president there. We've talked and negotiated everyone. We as a parliament are passing all the bills that are a demand from the United States, from IMF, and from our European partners to show that we are moving fast with the reforms even during the wartime. But unfortunately, the word I'm saying all the time is, Sasha, I'm sorry, this is internal politics. We have our border issue, we have something else, and even when the border deal was cut, and I mean, because it is stuck and it cannot be negotiated, we still see that the bill is not on the floor, and unfortunately I understand that this is a decision of one man right now in the country, and this is Speaker Johnson who can bring it on the floor. I do hope it works out with the motion, with the discharge motion, but it will be very difficult even for us to find those political suiciders, because there is not only the presidential campaign, but the campaign for the Congress this year. And I understand that these people would be very brave to sign the motion and to basically maybe put their careers to support Ukraine. I do know a few of them, and they promised me, the Republicans, I'm not going to be saying, of course, the names, but they did say if there's anything I would die on the floor for, that would be Ukraine. And I do hope that when it comes to not only voting, but actually putting a signature and supporting us, that would happen. But the good thing is, again, every time you come back, even looking at the internal politics, there is an overall support. And even being here today means that we do have support from the United States. They're backing us up. And of course, as long as I understand and as long as I see the bills, they will be more focused on the military. They will be more focused on supporting us with weapons, munition, and all the rest. Will have to be taken by Europeans. And that would be probably something we would come back asking, because we cannot, we keep explaining everyone, we cannot win the war if we fail as a country. And unfortunately for that, we do need not only the military support, but we do need the direct budget support. And I would also like to thank the United States ambassador, who did an incredible job persuading every congressman to support Ukraine, not only military, but financially. Thank you.
Let me just say that not only has the ambassador done a terrific job, but Sasha Ustinova, as a member of the Ukrainian parliament, and a group of her colleagues for 2 years have been coming to Washington, D.C., and they have become a very, very effective group of advocates on behalf of Ukraine. And they've gotten to develop relationships with members of the House and the Senate, and they make a difference every time they come to Washington. And I want to thank them and continue to come to Washington and make your voices heard, because it is necessary and you make a difference.
And then to Oleksiy Danilov, who is Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, and he will address us in Ukrainian.
Звичайно, я же українець.
Well, I am a Ukrainian. What else would you expect?
Шановні друзі, коли я отримав запрошення
When I was invited to attend this event, I was, however, a bit.
вам не чутно, пане
Can you hear? Yeah. I was a bit kind of taken aback by the question we are supposed to discuss. Will the U.S. decamp? question mark.
Я думаю, що воно якось
Well,
дивно звучить.
if you ask me, that does sound strange this day and age in the 21st century. We should then ask what's happened, and the United States don't want to be the great defender of the free world and democracy. They changed their position.
Російська Федерація.
What is the Russian Federation doing? Well, after World War II, certain rules were established. Free world, autocratic nations, nothing has changed since then. But there were nations that were standing guard of that free democracy, but something seems to be changing around the world. Values are put on hold, money matters more, human rights, democracy seems to be somewhere in the background. If we continue talking money, we will certainly lose to autocrats, where any person will make a decision based upon some information. February 24th, 2022, we were quite frustrated to see that many just left our country, ambassadors included. Why did they believe Ukraine would be defeated? Because probably they had been fed by unvalidated information. Modern day decision makers, do they get all the information they need to make these decisions? Do they know that in the past 670 days, where blood, sweat, and tears, our mothers and wives shed tears every day, and we shed blood. And we shed this blood for us and for you too. So when you call it assistance, help, I'd say it's wrong. It's your contribution to our fight, joint fight for freedom, democracy, for European values, free world value, and you are free to decide whether you're on our side or somewhere else.
Thank you. Alicia Kearns is a Member of Parliament of the United Kingdom, but also Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. 2 questions to you, apart from what you want to say. Can Europe make more if there is a problem on the American side? Second question, politics comes into it not only in the United States, but also in other countries. You have an election coming up this year. Do you see that as having any impact?
Thank you all ever so much for having me. But first of all, thank you to Ukraine. Thank you not just for fighting for the last 2 years for all of us, but fighting for 10 years to say that sovereignty cannot be achieved through violence. We are grateful to you. We need to spend more time saying thank you to you and less listening to you saying thank you to us. When we were given this topic, my main reflection was, why haven't we listened to the lessons of history? You cannot appease a dictator. Deterrence is a hard tool, not a soft one that you have to work on every single day. And unity and alliances are what make us different. It is what the autocrats do not truly have. And I find it ironic that 80 years on from Churchill going begging to the Americans and saying, please, fight for democracy, fight with us in Europe, we are doing it again. The title of the session horrifies me because it proves we haven't. And when I was on the Hill 3 weeks ago, I was reminded of one thing. The threat of Putin has been forgotten. And this is what we have to remind our American allies of every single day. Because even in the Heritage Foundation, those lofty individuals drafting Trump's manifesto who always stood so strong against Trump, they have against Putin, they have forgotten the threat. Now, when it comes to the USA, we do have to remember that action has been taken to stop Trump withdrawing unilaterally from NATO, and I thank our American colleagues for passing that legislation. He can still defund it, he can still take other actions, but we would hope that at least now some security has been provided. I do have to reflect, and you will never hear me be an apologist for Trump, but he did give javelins and he did give sanctions. So there are some signs that we are letting us shape the narrative of what a Trump future would look like. But the reality is that whether it's Trump or whether it's an invasion of Taiwan, Europe will have to step up to defend itself more. And for me, that looks like a UK, German, Poland, Ukraine alliance. Because Ukraine, at the end of this, will have the biggest military in Europe. They will have the most capable, the most efficient and capable military in Europe. Poland, they're spending 4.6% of GDP on defense. If they achieve their goals, they will achieve amazing things, and they are also going to be the biggest economy in Europe within 10 years. And the UK has stood absolutely steadfast behind our Ukrainian friends. We were the first to give tanks, the first to give long-range missiles, Storm Shadow, security agreements, training of our Ukrainian troops. We have shown ourselves to be the strategic leader around the world in terms of support for Ukraine. But my question is, but my main question to America is, why do we keep talking about November? We have months until we get to the American election. And yet Kamala Harris's speech at the Munich Security Conference was in the shadow of Trump. The decisions being made in America are in the shadow of Trump. Stop it. Do what you can do now. That is the main message. And in Europe, we need to stop talking about what if Putin invades one of our Baltic or Nordic neighbors in 2 years' time. That's in 2 years' time. We have to stop Putin now. And there is a choice. And Carl, you asked about the UK. We have our elections coming up. Ukraine is not a political issue. We have made the choice to be unified. There is not one British politician who would stand up in our parliament and say, do not support Ukraine, because we recognize that Ukrainians are dying for us. Ukraine is tired. The least we can do is be their support. So I would say we have to act now. Stop talking about what will happen in November. Adivka shows us this. We should be ashamed. Not Ukraine, we should be ashamed. Because why were so many lives lost for Adivka? Why will possibly tens of thousands more lives be lost trying to take it back again? Because we did not give Ukraine the ammunition it needed. So stop talking about November, stop living in the shadow of what might be, and deliver on what is needed. Every country needs to step up. The good guys don't just win. This isn't a movie. Give Ukraine what it needs to win and not just survive. And that is the message of the whole of the UK Parliament, not just me.
Thank you very much. Michael Roth is a Member of Parliament in Germany and Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Bundestag. And really the same two questions to you. First, can Europe do more, irrespectively of November or not? And secondly, how does it play in the domestic politics of Germany? You had a major debate in Bundestag just a couple of days ago on this particular subject.
Hello, everybody. Slava Ukraini. Thank you so much to our hosts for inviting me. I'm a simple politician from Germany, and I'm one of the German hawks if it comes to Russian imperialism. My message is very simple. I want that Ukraine prevails as a free, democratic, sovereign country in the very heart of the European Union and NATO. And that's my job, to help our Ukrainian friends in these tragic times. And this is not just my job because I love Ukraine and I love the people here in this wonderful country. It's in our German, it's in our national, it's in our European interest that Ukraine wins this war of aggression. That's very important. We in Germany are extremely grateful to our friends and allies in the United States because President Biden and his team saved our asses in Ukraine, but also in Europe. And I would like to talk about the elephant in the room, and let me be very clear, dear friends. Unfortunately, the times of US leadership on Ukraine are over, definitely over. And the 1 billion euro question is, are we willing and able in Europe to take more responsibility for Ukraine, for security interests? We are ready, Karl, we are ready to do much more under quite difficult circumstances. I would like to talk about the 3 strategic mistakes of Europe, especially the European Union. I know that Ursula von der Leyen has many big fans in Europe and here in Ukraine, but it's not quite helpful to deliver promises and you can't keep the promises. The European Union didn't keep its promise to deliver 1 million artillery shell by March this year. And this is a big, big threat for all of us. Second mistake. It's extremely important to step up the European defense industry, but it takes time. We invested too little, that's a problem, and we're not fast enough. So, let's be ready to buy the military equipment Ukraine needs on the world market. And okay, I'm ready to buy it in the United States because you are not willing to spend the money. So we have to do this. And this is the third big problem of the European Union. Buy European. Buy European. Yes, of course, I fully understand my distinguished colleagues from other national parliaments, but at the end, it's not a theoretical debate. We have to deliver right now. And that's why we have to strengthen our economic ties with countries who are willing and able to step up the defense production of the Ukraine. I think we have to learn our lessons from the mistakes in the past. So, in politics, we should always discuss about different scenarios. But honestly, we have to take more leadership. What is the alternative? That Russian imperialism wins? I know that many people in Germany and in other European countries wants peace. They are tired. But we don't have any right to be tired. The only people who have the right to be tired are the Ukrainians themselves. So we are not tired. Maybe we are too lazy. Maybe we are not engaged enough. Maybe we are not committed enough. And this is not just Ukraine, it's Europe. I'm very, very much concerned about the current developments, for instance, in Moldova. I'm not quite sure about the situation in Armenia or in Georgia. And the 1 billion question, the other one is, the heroes of Europe are not the Germans. Okay, we are the number 2 if it comes to military support and financial support to Ukraine, but we are not the heroes. The heroes are countries like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Denmark, Czech Republic, Slovakia, It will change. It will change. I'm really sorry to say this. But you will survive. We will survive as free, sovereign, democratic countries if the bigger sized countries in Europe take more responsibility. I'm grateful to my distinguished colleague and friend Alicia because she made very clear the United Kingdom is ready. Germany is ready. And now we have to convince our friends in France, Italy, Spain. The Polish friends and allies are on board. And we are not here just as individuals. We belong to a huge delegation of national parliamentarians, senior members of parliaments, chairs of foreign affairs committees across Europe, Canada. And we stand united if it comes to Ukraine. But I would like to encourage you, our Ukrainian friends. You are the authentic voices. Your communication is much better than my Chancellor's communication or the German communication. So please help us to deliver good arguments why it is in our interest that you prevail. I'm a simple politician. I'm directly elected member of parliament for more than 26 years. And I know in a democracy, without public acceptance, it wouldn't work. And that's why we have to fight, not just here in Ukraine, or in other countries. I have to fight in my own country to convince my fellow citizens that the investment in freedom of Ukraine is a good, is a forward-looking, is a sustainable, is an excellent investment. And please help us. Your victory is our victory. Thank you.
Thank you. Very powerful statement. The question is still lingering. I listened to your Chancellor, for example, at the Munich Security Conference, and he started his remarks by asking himself, have we done enough? And then he said, we haven't done enough. And then he said, which I think was entirely appropriate, Germany is number 2 in terms of military support. If every other European country did as much, he didn't mention France, it would be substantially different. It is very true, as you pointed out, that some of the smaller ones, the Baltic states and others, are, if you see it in relation to their size, the ones that are the real heroes of what they are doing. But it is very important that the bigger European countries, all of them, step up with their support, and all of them have the possibility. If we are talking about the amount of money, we are talking about the order of 0.3% of GDP, which is a lot of money, but perfectly possible to do. There are budgetary restraints. Germany has a specific problem, but it's not inconceivable to do it. Then we have all of the defense production aspects, but that's a somewhat separate issue. Alexandra wanted to come in.
I just have one question to my colleagues from Germany and the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, we understand that, well, it may sound weird, but the defense industry was developed for peaceful times. It does not work during the wartime. You cannot produce enough even for yourself, for you to defend yourself. I'm not even talking about a full-scale invasion like it is right now in Ukraine. But there are certain steps that can be done by the parliaments right now. Like, you have the 500-kilometer storm shadows. You have the 500-kilometer Taurus. And you had been debating for more than 2 years after the full-scale invasion whether those can be provided to Ukraine. You have ATACMS, which are 300 kilometers, and we've been begging for those. And we received the ones 165 only. And we cannot reach what we need to reach. And I'm chairing the Commission on Arms Control, and so far there has been 0 questions to where the weapons are going. Nobody is questioning how Ukrainians are using them. Why are you still afraid to provide those? If your governments cannot do that, why don't you pass a bill in the parliament saying, well, please, Mr. Scholz, you should provide Taurus to Ukraine. Or please give them the 500-kilometer storm shadows because they're at war and they need it now.
I was about to say, so just on Storm Shadow, we have given the Storm Shadows.
You gave us the 200-kilometer ones.
We've also given, there are public and private differences as to what we give and what we say publicly is not necessarily the same. But without the storm shadows, you wouldn't have the Black Sea free, and you would have Crimea under attack.
We've had storm shadows for a while, and we have scalps from France, and we are grateful for those. But what I'm saying is we need the longer range ones.
I fully understand the emotions here in this room, because in Germany we are obsessed by this controversy about Taurus, yes or not. And please, please, calm down a bit. Not the Ukrainian friends. But yesterday we had a meeting with the defense ministry, and we were asking, what do you need right now? What are the priorities? And it's not just the cruise missile. Ammunition, ammunition, ammunition is the first priority. Second, air defense and rockets. And third, armed drones. On Thursday, unfortunately, without my vote, a resolution passed the German Bundestag with a clear message. Yes, we support the delivery of long-ranged cruise missiles. Sorry, I'm a civilian. Long-ranged cruise missiles. So, but it's the core competence of my government. And I'm crystal clear if it comes to Taurus. But again, if we just focus the whole debate on systems, it won't help us. I think we all have to do much more. Germany is in the lead, of course, but the cruise missiles are just one problem. I fully agree with you. We have to step up right now. We have to buy the equipment worldwide, as I mentioned before. This is very important.
And on that particular issue...
And Carl, sorry, I forgot.
No.
Because Carl raised a question which is very important. We have some... I don't want to go into the details of German politics, but you should know we have a very weird budget restriction in our constitution. My distinguished friends in Europe and in the United States don't understand the complexity of our constitution, but my coalition, and I'm a social democrat, my coalition made it very clear. If we can't count on the United States or other allies and friends in Europe, we are willing and able to invest more money, and we have to find a creative, innovative solution to be flexible with our constitutional budget restrictions. So we don't have financial problems. I think we have problems with production, with the export. We have problems with our European or bi-European priority. And please, dear colleague here from the Rada, talk to the French, talk to other distinguished colleagues in Europe to overcome this blockade. It's not helpful.
Also, our parliament doesn't allow us to pass motions like that. It's amazing how little power a British politician has compared to a lot of politicians in other countries. I would love to have a little bit more. We can discuss that. But unfortunately, we don't have the ability to pass motions or to block budgets.
But the German parliament can pass the motion, but it's still the German government that decides. But anyhow, we shouldn't go too much into the constitutional complexities of the different European countries. Just let's add that on what Michael says, buying non-European, I think on ammunition that's on its way. I mean, the Czechs have identified a very substantial number of artillery ammunition, and that's been somewhat of a problem. What I hear now is that is highly likely to be sorted out, that particular aspect of it, and that is good. What worries me in terms of production ain't necessarily artillery ammunition, because it is increasing now as fast as it can be increased. It takes some time, absolutely, but I'm more concerned with the air defense aspects of it. Because if you took up missiles and you are shooting missiles, because the Russians are shooting missiles, there the production times unavoidably are substantially much longer than when we talk about artillery ammunition. So that is the aspect that sort of worries me. Although I say all the time, let's liberate the discussion from the eternal discussion of the one weapon system after the other. There is no Wunderwaffe that can sort this out. It is a combination of a lot of different efforts that is necessary. Jim wanted to come in.
Let me just say that I think this conversation we're having in terms of the reflection of the political will, both in Europe and the United States, is appropriate. 2 years into this war that Ukraine has made all the sacrifices that we've spoken of, there was an assessment, I remember in the YES conference last September. I was on a panel, Ukraine Fatigue, and there was a discussion at the time that the new counteroffensive that Ukraine was about to embark upon, that people were feeling like, well, this could end in 2 years. We're here in the 2-year anniversary of this war. And I think one thing's clear, and that is that the public will in Europe and in the United States is key to maintaining the support that Ukraine needs, but that the rest of us need. When President Lincoln said during the Civil War, with public will, everything is possible, and without it, nothing is. And we, I think, have been under the impression last year that that Ukraine had the wind in their back, they had the advantages, and this was going to come to a conclusion sooner than later. Well, that's not the case. And we've been micromanaging the war in the White House in terms of the support that we've been giving and in Congress. And I think there's been a bit of that micromanaging among the European allies. How much should we give now, then, when? We just need to give Ukraine everything it needs to successfully win this war. They are on the battlefield. And so we must remember, and Putin says it it's no longer a special mission. He's telling his people that this is a fight for the motherland of Russia against the United States and Europe. And that's an easy message for Putin to say, because that goes back to the era of the Soviet Union. It was them against the United States and Europe. And that's how he's portraying this battle today. It's not Ukraine. And remember, up until 2 years ago today, the longest peacetime period in Europe, post-World War II, was in over 1,000 years, the peace that existed up until 2 years ago. People take that for granted. People don't know their history. They don't know the history in Europe. They don't know the history in the United States. They don't know that it was the longest peacetime period that we experienced. And therefore, the unity that we talk about, the reassessment of where we are in this war, this is really, I think, where we are today. We have some critical decisions to be made among the alliance. Sweden, Finland are now a part of NATO. The stepping up of Europe is critical because people in the United States say, well, what are they doing in Europe? Well, the reality is that while we've given a lot of money and a lot of military assistance, in terms of GDP, we rank 16th. 16th. The largest economic power in the world, and we are not carrying our share of the load. It's that simple. And therefore, we still have the majority in the Congress to support this. Yes, we have an election coming up. Yes, we are preoccupied, like many Europeans are, with their domestic challenges. But this is the long term. This is the fight for democratic values and whether or not we will continue to carry the day in the 21st century. Historians, and I'll close on this note, will look at the decisions we're talking about right now in Europe and the United States, and they'll look 20 years from now and say, did we make more good decisions than poor decisions? Your assessment, my colleague from Germany, about the mistakes that were made over the last year or so, we can make that assessment in the United States. We thought we had it just right. It was, I think, foolish to make that kind of an assessment. I think it was foolish to count on the fact that the politics would not intervene in a way that would make it more difficult. And so those are lessons to be learned. And therefore, collectively, we have to come together in Europe and the United States and really show the rest of the world that we're willing to stand up for our freedoms and for our sovereignty and for our democratic values. That's what's at stake.
Good points. Before I open up to the audience, let's listen to one of the veterans again, which gives us a reality check.
Hello again, I'm a soldier of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. I'm listening to your discussion, and my main question is about waiting discussion to give or not to give. So my only question is, we are the country that's been attacked, and we are protecting the values of entire Europe: family, democracy, independence, life. So today we're talking about your questions, whether we should be given something or not. But how can you ask this? We're being attacked and you're still thinking whether you should help us. However, our values are the same as you have. Where's this threshold when you don't have to think, don't have to discuss, but just to take a step, officially or not officially, so that we get it and not wait? You know, my leg and the leg that I lost is the proof of what I have not been able to get while I was waiting. I lied in the battlefield for 6.5 hours before I've been evacuated. And our amputees and our dead guys, and there's an immense number of them. You know, why we're talking about all this? Life, democracy, independence. What can we discuss further? Help us to defeat this evil which attacked us, because if they overcome us, they will reach every house, every home, every family in your countries. What are we waiting for? Why don't you send us help, and we'll do what we can do in our fight? I have lost my leg, and I understand that I will live with this, but I'll be proud, and I will be living with an understanding that you helped us, and thus you have emphasized the value of our life and our values for you. Glory to Ukraine.
Thank you. I see someone there. Please identify yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Butsurkiw. I'm a senior fellow at the Yalta Council, Eurasia Center, and I'm also a former spokesperson of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine and a regular on CNN and BBC World. Question about sanctions. Perhaps we can get an answer from the Ukrainian side and European friends. My Prime Minister Trudeau started out the war talking about how sharp a tool sanctions are in terms of deterring Mr. Putin. The problem is, just quickly, the Russians spent a long time being tutored by the best sanctions busters in the world: Iran, North Korea, China, especially during COVID. And now we're around 13, 14, and it doesn't seem to me, at least, that sanctions are a huge deterrent to Mr. Putin. In fact, some critics will say they're a good way for politicians to pat themselves on the back and feel good. So I'd like to hear from you whether you feel the West should pay as much attention to sanctions, and that's above and beyond the question of what should be done with the 300 billion in frozen Russian assets, which the Europeans seem very fearful to release at least the interest earnings to Ukraine. Thank you.
who wants to take on that one?
I can start as a Ukrainian. Thank you, Michael, for this question. Well, the second one, I think Russia will make Russia pay. This is an easy answer, and unfortunately, it's not only Europeans. I think there is no common decision on that these assets have to be basically sent to Ukraine. They're frozen, but nothing is being done within the last 2 years. And we've had several meetings in the Treasury. Treasury is pointing to the Europeans. And there is no unity in the European countries to actually provide those. But coming back to the sanctions, and thank you so much for that. There is one example. Russia had tripled the production of their ballistic missiles last year. Tripled. That's how sanctions work. And all of the chips and everything else they're buying from the developed countries, from the Western countries. If they can do it being so hardly sanctioned, it means there are no sanctions. Less than 10% of the banks are sanctioned. Well, so you basically just shut down, close the account and open in another bank. We had been begging the United States to designate Russia as the state sponsor of terrorism. And I remember we had promises. First, it was supposed to be Secretary Blinken who was supposed to do that. Then the previous speaker said they would pass a bill in the parliament if Blinken doesn't take that decision. That has never been done, and I don't see any potential here, especially in Congress, to do that. There had been resolutions, but we know there is a difference between the resolution and the bill. I'm so sorry. And if there is no political will to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism when Cuba is, I don't understand what sanctions we're talking. And that would be the serious sanctions that Iran has, for example, secondary sanctions that we keep talking about, so nobody else can be trading with Russia. So I think unless something like Pearl Harbor happens, the one that is today. That can be treated as a Pearl Harbor. I don't think that's going to pass definitely right now in the United States. And I just want to be mistaken, but we haven't seen any potential for the last 2 years.
Well, let me just say, the Ukrainians have been telling us for the last year that the sanctions, unless they're enforced, unless they're brought together, are not going to be effective. And a year later, we have found the sanctions have not been effective. India purchased $37 billion of oil last year from Russia. And we know where the sanctions have not been able to have the effect that we wanted them to. Now, there's another round of sanctions that the president announced yesterday, but the reality, in my view, is they're not going to be any more effective than the last rounds of sanctions unless we have the collective will to enforce them together between Europe and the United States. There is strong support for the $300 billion of Russian assets that is primarily held, I understand, in Belgium and in Switzerland. And we have legislation on this point. There is a lot of effort to press on that to give that Russian money to Ukraine. That's where the money should go. But again, it gets back to the political will to, in fact, take that action. And I know that there is broad support in the United States for that, but we've got to have the willingness to, with our European allies, to take those Russian funds and to send those monies where they belong, to Ukraine.
Seize the money. It's really not that difficult. Seize the Russian funds and use it to pay for Ukraine's defense and Ukraine's reconstruction. I do think we're going to get there. I really do. Yes, there is the European Bank, Christine Lagarde, and there's the Belgians who aren't very happy about it. But the G7 is becoming a geopolitical tool, and you have seen that really over the last few months. I think we will see a G7 initiative coming forward. Our Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, is determined to make that happen, and we will seize it. There's a bill, the Repo Act in the US. There's all sorts of different efforts. I think we'll get there. On sanctions, though, I do want to caution this discussion that kind of outright dismisses sanctions as being purposeful. I had a briefing just before I came here at a higher security classification than I can speak at, and actually some sanctions have had incredibly strong impacts. But the thing about a sanction is, if you put a sanction in place 4 years ago, of course it's still not going to be impactful now. If you put in place a sanction 6 months ago, it may not still be impactful 6 months later, because we live in an international, highly mobile economy where you can move things quickly, where things change, where you diversify, you move, and Russia has moved to a war footing. So I think it is important we don't just dismiss sanctions. I want to see the DIA sanctioned. I want to see more sanctions on metals. I want to see sanctions on British companies that are providing the insurance for Russian firms. I want to see sanctions against Russia for buying Iranian drones. That is in circumvention of sanctions. Sanctions do matter, but they are a temporary measure that are meant to change behavior. They're not going to change behavior here, so they are just punitive. But we have to assume that each sanction probably has a max lifetime of 18 months, and then you need to move on to the next, and the next, and the next. And I would like to see more sanctions come together at once, and we have to move as a bloc, because again, that's the only time that it's effective.
Mr. Danilov?
Я хотів би, перш за все,
I would like to, first of all,
вам дати відповідь, що відбувається.
our friend veteran, tell you what's going on. The answer, it's a rather prosaic
Захід переляканий.
answer. The West is scared of Russia. The West does not know what to do with Russia, and that's why they do not give us an opportunity to defeat Russia. This is a hard and difficult truth, but we have to live with this. Until they decide what to do, because they have invented the notion that this is a great country, this is a powerful country, they are prey to Russian blackmail, and Putin, through different emissaries, sends them the messages that if you do something to us, then we will deliver a nuclear bomb to you and throw the nuclear bomb to you and all other things like this. This is a very complicated and difficult question. And I want to tell all our Western partners a very simple thing. If you're scared of a dog, it will bite you. Don't be afraid of anyone. As soon as you become afraid, you lose. You are now losing to the autocratic Russia. And the war is going on not only in Ukraine. The war is going in many places in the world. You are just shutting your eyes to it. I'm not even talking about the Red Sea. There are many other places. As far as sanctions are concerned, I liked the British MP representative speech very much. She was talking about movement, about all other things. But please tell me why Boeing Airbus is still flying over Russia. It's very simple to stop this and to make them travel on the horses made by Yakuts. Ukrainians know what this was about. And Siemens let them stop the railways in Russia.
Just one remark, but it is of utmost importance. The Russian Federation is the last country which holds colonies in its territory after the Second World War. The rest of the countries got rid of their colonies. So if you think that you can keep Russia in this composition, I should say no to that. It will never hold. It's what you thought back at the beginning of the 90s, that the USSR was there to stay, but it didn't stay. And the same is going to happen to Russia. We have to do that. This is a challenge for all the world, but this is inevitable, because from the other side there's China, and China will take advantage of that immediately. And you're talking about Tauruses, whether to give it or not. I think this is a childish discussion. I think yesterday our glorious warriors downed A-50, a very important Russian aircraft. They only had 6 at the beginning, now they have 4. And the missile downing the C-200 is 2 years older than myself. But we put it to good use, because you are not providing us with the newer ones.
There we are. There we are. Could I just make a couple of comments on the sanctions? I mean, the fact that Boeings are flying is because the Russians stole them. Airbus the same. These were aircraft that were in Russia as hostilities started. And instead of returning them to the owner as they should have done, they didn't do that. They stole the aircraft. And they are flying them without spare parts and without repairs. And that has a rather detrimental effect on air safety. And we've seen effect of that. So that illustrates also the fact that, and there I think we have, all of us, been less honest in the discussion about sanctions. They seldom have an immediate dramatic effect. They always have a long-term significant effect. And the long-term effect of deteriorating the Russian economy is and will remain substantial, increasing year by year. But it's not a cliff. It is a slope down. And then, of course, we have the rather substantial problem of implementation. It is very easy for the US to announce something. It is very easy for Brussels to announce something. But have this implemented and policed. You know which is the second largest exporter of semiconductors to Russia? It's Maldives. Now, Maldives is not known for its production of semiconductors. But of course, they have been brought there from somewhere, which has brought them from somewhere, which has brought them from somewhere. And if you look at the trade statistics of Kazakhstan and a couple, not only Maldives, you see things happening. To police that is not impossible, but is difficult. And it is increasingly happening. But it's also the question that what you can easily prevent is the big stuff. There will be no Boeings and Airbus delivered to Russia, that's for certain, because that you can control. A ship is that big. A ship is that big. I can smuggle a year's worth of what they need for certain weapons in my bag. And policing that is quite a task. So I think we need to be somewhat more realistic in the sanctions discussion. Much is happening, it's having an effect. I'm quite certain that there are endless meetings all the time in Moscow on how they should handle all these particular problems. But it's not a cliff. It is a long slope down for the Russian economy, and that has its effect on the ability of Russia to conduct this war or to conduct whatever else they want to do. But that was, I'm supposed to be the moderator.
Я би хотів, я перепрошую, пане Богдане.
I'm sorry, I have to respect seniority, but I should disagree with you. Because there's the international rules of aviation flights, and there's ICAO, and ICAO is supposed to certify all the airports. If you say that the Russian Federation is using stolen aircraft, ICAO in Toronto should take away certificates from all the Russian airports. In that case, they will not be able to land any aircrafts there or take off. So Toronto, ICAO, and the international community are turning a blind eye on that. Nobody wants to touch this issue. There should be. Where there's a will, there's a way.
I would just say that when Lavrov landed in Brazil, he was not allowed to refuel his plane because of sanctions. They are working, but not always in the most obvious way. And yes, we need to do more, but a lot of these things we don't see. But I personally enjoyed knowing that Lavrov was sat there wondering how he was going to get home to the motherland. So,
Please.
Hello to everyone. My name is Olga Ivasovska. I'm from Civil Network Opora, Ukrainian NGO. And I have to highlight that there are so many good friends of Ukraine here that we don't need to shame them. And few of them were in Kyiv when the embassies left Kyiv 2 years ago. So they are fighters for Ukrainian interests for sure. But what I have to highlight that we're still suffering because of the number of military aid for protecting Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, Ukrainian cities. We need to protect protect Ukraine from new waves of refugees to EU, and EU will pay a high price if Ukrainian refugees will have to leave Ukraine. As foreign media already wrote, if we will not have access to military aid from US, maybe 20 million of Ukrainians will leave country, and it's about $1 trillion for their economy. So what I have to ask now, during this gap, what Congress or your parliaments have to do for investigate the situation with US and other foreign components in Russian missiles and rockets? Because now we are suffering that 75% of the components in some of the equipment from Russia, which are destroying our cities, are from the US. So can you highlight this topic from Congress side? Because we need parliamentary control now during this period, during this gap, and I hope that you can do it even before big decision between Republicans and Democrats. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the point you made. And this is a continuing effort that I said earlier involves educating the American public. And there's different ways that we can pay the costs. We can do what the right thing to do is and provide the Ukrainian people what they need and with support with our allies in Europe, or we can continue to as some Americans believe, that this war doesn't involve them. But there's an education that has to be done, and we as members of Congress must do that. I try to do that on a daily basis, and many of my colleagues do. And that's why there still is a majority of votes, 70 to 29, just 10 days ago in the Senate. And I think there will be 300 votes, possibly, for the supplemental package if we can get it to the floor. And that's the challenge we're faced with right now. There's an immediacy to this, and you wonder, rightfully so, why wasn't this done 4 months ago? It should have been done. It should have been done last summer. But I can explain to you why it didn't happen, but that's not going to change the fact that we must pass it now. And we're trying to do everything possible to do that.
On that point, though, in America, I was amazed the amount of people on the Hill who did not know that Europe has given 170 billion euros. Right. The amount of American senators and Republicans who didn't know that Lithuania has given 1.6% of its GDP. Estonia has given every single howitzer. But for me, the most insidious was this idea that we hear the phrase, Ukraine needs to show us that they can make progress. Ukraine needs to show us that they can move past the so-called stalemate that some people want to call it. We in the West need to fight that narrative, because Ukraine does not need to prove itself to any of us. Ukraine does not need to make progress for us. As I said earlier, the good guys don't just win. But the idea that because you were so successful in the first year, that now you have to keep going, it is absolutely wrong. So we have to make the point that you have destroyed $1 billion worth of Russian equipment in 1 month. You have protected the Black Sea without a single warship. You have brought back over 50% of territory to you. You are fighting time and time again, and you are succeeding against one of the 3 biggest militaries in the world. And we get to defeat one of our biggest enemies in the world without a single one of our British or German or American citizens dying. We have to make that fight for you, because I am sick and tired of hearing that Ukraine has to do more when that is just not the case morally, legally, but it also does not reflect the reality on the ground, where what you are doing is incredible in the face of what you face.
You're right. Ukraine does it every day. Every day. And 2/3 of the Russian tanks have been destroyed by Ukraine. Over 300,000 of their soldiers have been lost. And but Americans need to be educated on that fact. Members of Congress need to be educated.
2 final questions, one there and then Jessica down there.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. My name is Katerina Rybik. I'm a Chief Strategy Officer for DAC and a Strategic Advisor for Opor in Poland Foundation. I have 2 very quick questions. One is to Congressman Costa about the sanctions on the fertilizers, and specifically the US Treasury clarification that agricultural commodities, including fertilizers, are not subject of any sanctions against Russia. So my question is very simple. Don't you find it counterintuitive? And the second question is to all our... Thank you. Any more details you can provide, or maybe your vision of how this issue can be addressed?
Well,
Yeah.
Take the second question.
Second question is to all international guests and the panel about leadership. You all said and agreed that we need to step up and step in with the leadership from the US, UK, European Union. Could you please share a 3-point action plan how this vision for leadership stepping up and stepping in can be implemented? Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica, down there.
Thank you, Jessica Berlin. I'm a senior fellow for transatlantic defense and security at SIPA and an independent policy analyst. And I have a question for Michael Roth as a German. So I have great respect, first and foremost, for your work as, of course, a loud voice and strong ally for Ukraine, despite so much pushback that you get from within your own party. So I ask you these questions with great respect for what you do for Ukraine. But you made 2 points. Firstly, on Taurus, the fact that Taurus is not the only thing that Ukraine needs does not mean that Ukraine does not still need it. I know it's been a very difficult debate in the Bundestag, but my question is, where is the leadership, where is the power politics and the action from Parliament, from this coalition, when we all know that Scholz is the single blocker in the German government making this decision be blocked? Why is the entire coalition incapable of moving action on this? Is Scholz really so strong? I ask half ironically. We really need to see more, and I'm curious to hear what you think can be done to force the Chancellery's hand. And secondly, your comment that the Ukrainians are better on communications than the Germans, and the Ukrainians should somehow help Germany speak to the German people. For 2 years, myself and many other German analysts have been trying to have this conversation both with German politicians and the German public. And you, as a parliamentarian, and many of your colleagues, you are much closer to the German voting public than we are, and certainly than the Ukrainian government. So my question to you would actually be to turn around your question to the Ukrainians and say, what messages are working? What do you need to reach the voters? Because so many of us are willing to help. But I don't think it's Ukraine's job to speak to the German people. I think it's the German government's job to speak to the German people. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a screen here that tells me that we have 10 seconds to go. So any further comments? That are going to be quick. Alicia.
3-point plan. Seize and freeze through the G7, because that's the only thing that will make a meaningful difference. 2, pursue a special tribunal on Ukraine. Justice is the one thing that has impacted on Putin so far. Look at the ICC in terms of genocide. And the 3rd, we need a UK, Poland, Ukraine, Germany agreement. It needs to be a security agreement that involves defense production and working together, because those are the 4 countries who can really determine the future for Europe.
Well, what about Sweden?
I love Sweden, but that's another story.
In the last couple of days, many colleagues asked me, Michael, we missed you on this Munich Security Conference. We missed you there. Because, honestly speaking, I invest my time in discussing with my constituents, with people in my party, who are not convinced that investment in Ukraine's security is an investment in our common security. So, it's very simple. That's my job as a member of a parliament, to be a bridge builder, to convince people, and to pay tribute to that what I learned here from Ukraine. And I would like to encourage you, not just our Ukrainian friends, to deliver emotions, empathy. That's very important, I think, for the German discussion, because many citizens in my country are a bit tired. And that's why the Ukrainians, with their hearts, with their minds, are so welcome in Germany in the public discussions, in a close cooperation with other allies and friends from Europe, but also from the United States. I think we have to stand united. And one of the problems with the Taurus is that nobody tells us why the Taurus is a problem. I have no idea why. So I just can deliver good arguments. And my impression from my conversations with senior politicians and political leaders here in Ukraine was, yes, we need these cruise missiles, but a lot remains to be done. And I just try to emphasize that there is no controversial discussion in Germany about ammunition, about air defense, about rockets, about armed drones. We should do that right now. And okay, let's discuss about the Taurus, but this is not the only problem. That's what I tried to explain to you. And thank you for your patience with us in Germany. And I feel really honored to be here because it encouraged me to deliver your arguments, the veterans' arguments, to the people in my country. Thank you so much.
Let me make one point clear, and you talked about a three-point plan, and I think our friend gave some good indication of what that might contain. But while I may have some disagreements with our president, I support him. And I think, by and large, for 2 years, he has tried to mobilize and bring the allies together on behalf of Ukraine. I think in some ways NATO today is stronger than it's been since the Cold War. I think that we certainly have put a great deal of U.S. support in so many different ways. Yes, we have elections. Yes, we have a political debate. But every week, every day, the president has been fighting for this supplemental package, going back to last year. And in some cases, the more he pushes it, there are some who, because they want to see him defeated, are unwilling to support it because they think it somehow might enhance his own political efforts in November. And that's a sad commentary in the United States because politics in the past used to generally end at the water's edge, as we used to say. But no more, sadly. But let's be clear, President Biden is doing everything he possibly can with those of us who support this supplemental package to get it done. And he has been adamant on that in every way I can tell you.
Thank you to all of you. Thanks for your contribution to the panel, and thank you for what you're doing in your own particular domestic debates. Thanks.